Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'd love for you to tell me where in the world you are. I'd love to see people from all over generally joining. So thanks so much. I'm the owner of Civility Partners. We're a consulting firm focused on building positive, thriving work environments. And I have a man after my own heart here with me today, Shola Richards. And I know we're going to talk a lot about your experiences and your book. So I'm really excited. You're a best-selling author, keynote, TEDx speaker, and nicknamed Brother Teresa. So I want to know who nicknamed you that. Let's start there. Actually, let's start with you introducing yourself a little.
Oh, sure. No, you already did such a fabulous job, Catherine. So, I mean, yeah, so I'm Shola Richards. I'm a keynote speaker, author. And basically, I want to change the world based on how we treat each other at work. That's really what got me into the space of civility and working against anti-bullying. Or not working against anti-bullying is a double negative. Working against bullying to make sure we create a healthy environment so people can do their best work and live their best lives. That's really what I do. But the Brother Teresa thing came up at an event I was speaking at, and it was recorded, and someone in the question and answer was like, you know what, man, you're like Brother Teresa, and the entire place erupted. And then the video of it went online, like, you're Brother Teresa now. So I've leaned in. That's now the word that I have that follows me internationally, and I'm cool with it.
I love it. I love it. So I think our entrance into what we're doing these days is probably similar. But tell us a little bit more about how I know you worked for a large organization and went through some things. Tell us a little bit about your journey into what you're doing now.
Yeah. So before I worked for the large organization, I worked for a smaller one. And to for like a long story short, it was incredibly toxic at this workplace. They made it very clear that I wasn't welcome there, and the things that they did were like cartoonishly awful. And it's almost like, really, people act like this. I could bore you with stories, but I'll just give you one super quick one. I would make my lunch for work, like a turkey sandwich, and I'd put it into the break room fridge. And when I put it into the fridge and I went to my cubicle to go do work, that was the cue for my colleagues to run to the break room fridge, pull my sandwich out of my lunch bag, step on it, like literally step on it, Catherine, so I can see the footprint in the bread, and they put it back into my lunch bag. That and other atrocities took place over the span of about 18 months. And I ended up falling to a very deep depression. But
Yeah.
it's not like I was sad. I was clinically depressed. And it got to the point where one morning when I was going to this job, like, dude, I'm done. I'm done. But I wasn't saying I was done with the job. Unfortunately, it was darker than that. I made a decision while driving to this job that I was going to take my own life. And I attempted. So I'm coming to you this morning, or wherever you're viewing this from, as a suicide survivor. And to be specific, I live in Los Angeles, and while driving down the 405 freeway here in Los Angeles, I attempted to drive my car off the overpass. Thankfully, the guardrail held. I'm still here. And yeah, that's the work I've been doing. And it all sparked from that moment when I came back into traffic. I'm like, I cannot let this happen to anyone else. Certainly not to me again. And that's what really started me on the path to try to end toxic workplaces.
And when was that? How long ago was that?
About 20 years ago. Yeah, a little over 20 years ago. So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
But as well, I'll speak for myself. I was like, who am I to share this stuff? Or who am I to fight against this stuff or try to make any meaningful change? A lot of imposter syndrome came into play. And I kept talking, someone should do something. Someone should do something about this. And one of my friends was like, hey, you're someone. Why don't
Yeah.
you do something about it? And I was like, oh, yeah. So that's kind of nice to get that little call back to kind of reset me and get me thinking differently about the situation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say, thankfully, I was fired from my job. So I also was depressed, but not to the point where you had gotten. And maybe if I had stayed, I would have ended up in a similar boat. But thankfully, I was fired. And so I had to figure it out and all of that. So thank you for sharing that and being so open. And I just want to say, too, you're not the only one, right, that the way people are treated at work can literally drive people to PTSD.
Correct.
I'm actually a subject matter expert on a court case right now where a person hung themselves after years of abuse at work. So so thank you so much for being so vulnerable around that, because what we do for work is a big part of our identity. So not only are we feeling, we're social creatures by nature. So if you're in a social setting where you're being left out, and not only left out, but bullied and harassed and all of that, and abused, that really hits at our survival needs, our instinct, just like not having food. And then couple that with the fact that what we do for work is a huge part of our identity.
Yes.
It's just, yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
It's tough because it's interesting now, because people think like, wow, it's 2024. We've gotten better, right? It's like, well, every time I get off stage, invariably one of three things happens. One, someone tells me, hey, I lost someone to suicide that I love. Or two, I'm working in a really deeply toxic work environment and I attempted to take my own life. Or three, they're like, listen, I'm in a pretty dark place at work right now and in life, and I'm considering doing it. So like, this is not something that, it's not like people wear signs around saying, hey, listen, I'm really thinking about ending my own life. But when you spend, such a large portion, 84,000 hours of your lifetime at work, and if the majority of those hours are dealing with passive aggressive jerks or narcissists or bullies or harassers, it's kind of clear that eventually all those hours will have a toll on you that will mess up your mental health and emotional health and physical health in ways that we couldn't even imagine. That's why we have to really start to take some real focus in dealing with this.
Yeah. Did you quit your job after that day of driving?
Immediately.
Okay,
I literally made the rest of the drive to work and I'm like, I'm out. And I think what's important to mention about that story is like, there's such a hero's journey kind of mythical thing to this, which is not really accurate. Like, and that happened, and then I quit, and then all of a sudden I'm this workplace civility guy. Well, no, I ended up taking out I had no money in savings. I just knew that I had to get out of there. Like it was life or death. I'll figure it out. And I took out a predatory loan of like 67% interest just so I could survive. Like this is the part of the story that doesn't get shared on stages very often because they just want get to the point. But the reality is there's so much to the story that when you're in a life or death situation, you will do whatever it takes to keep going. And for me, I just had to get out of there, and I'll jump and I'll build a parachute on the way down.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, when I got fired, I had a friend who was like, I pay my mortgage without a renter, so you can live here rent free. I don't need your money. And she definitely picked me up and helped me move on. So why, people ask me this all the time, and I think about it too. Like, why do I even have a company called Civility Partners? Like, I shouldn't have this company because people should treat each other well. And they don't, right? So what do you think is contributing to this? And it's like, it's hard to say. Is it declining? Has it always just been this awful, but we have the internet now, so we're more aware of it? I don't know what the answer is. I know in the workplace bullying research, this has just always been there. And it's always been that, basically 100% of people experience something awful at work over the course of their life. But anyway, what do you think the problem is? Why are we here?
I honestly think it's getting worse personally. Okay. I mean, I think, there's a really interesting statistic from like the leading civility researchers, KRC researcher Weber Chanwick. They had a really interesting statistic. 75% of Americans believe that we are in a civility crisis in America. Mm-hmm. While also 93% of Americans believe that they're always or usually polite and respectful to others. So we have to start here, right? We have a civility problem, but we also have a self-awareness problem. We don't think we're the problem. So we see stuff happening, and when we hear these behaviors, that's not me. You see it at work all the time. The person who's a complete jerk, who, when you're having a meeting and you're talking about these behaviors, like, yeah, that's right, we got to stop doing that. When they realize they're the one who's doing it, and everyone's rolling their eyes at this person sitting up here saying, like, yeah, we need to do better as an organization. No, Fred, you need to do better. You're the issue. So part of it is self-awareness. That's one thing. But I also think there's also challenges around the fact, kind of zooming out a little bit from the workplace to just the world in general, we often do not hang out with voluntarily people who look differently than us, pray differently than us, maybe even vote differently from us. Interestingly enough, there's more studies that say the overwhelming majority of people only have friends of their race. Meaning, I don't want to. There's a study, and I'm going to kind of spitball this because I don't know the number exactly, but it's a high number that, like, something like 70 or 60% of white Americans do not have one friend of color, which is wild, right? And people who are people of color often hang out with people of their own race as well. So if you're not finding a way to be around people or have real interaction with them, then the only real experience that you're getting about these folks or information is from the news. And that's pretty awful because you don't want the media shaping your opinions on anything, right? So the idea is, how do you find a way to lean in and actually, because you hear this, my mom would always say it's hard to hate people close up. And if you get to know people, then we're able to bridge divides. But unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors out there that are interested in keeping people divided, and whether it's social media folks or politicians or what have you. So we have to supersede that programming and take the steps, uncomfortable steps, to get to be around each other. That's how we bridge divides and create a more civil world.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. It's hard to, what did you say? Up close. It's hard to hate people up close.
Hard to hate people up close. Hard to hate people up close.
Someone my last week, my LinkedIn live show, she said, you can't be furious and curious at the same time.
Ooh, that's good.
I thought that was a good one too.
It's true.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when people say, well, I'm not racist. It's like, well, why? Because you don't. No, maybe you're, it's like the white people that told you that,
right. And also
they all think you're nice. Cool. Yeah.
It's also funny because if you're not a racist, why would you have to even say that? Right.
Yeah.
It's like the whole thing of, like, there's certain things that you should not have to say about yourself. Like,
right.
I'm so funny, I'm handsome. Like, those are things that you shouldn't never say. If you do say it, was a red flag, right? And the same thing, I'm not a racist. Well, then wait, why would you even say that? Like, does it make any sense?
You're obviously feeling defensive.
Yeah, there's something there, right? There's something. But I think that's part of the challenge that we have to fight through, this idea of how do we get people that we perceive to be different from us in a room or in a conversation where we can talk and actually understand our similarities. And I think what's important, it's not like whitewashing all of our differences. We're all the same. That's crazy. That's not even true. We are different. However, can we be in a room where we can respect our differences? That's the thing that I think is missing, the ability to respect our differences and to be kind, not nice. And I think there's a big difference that a lot of people struggle with. Just really quickly on this. Nice is just simply being polite and agreeable, which that's a low bar. Some of the worst human beings on earth can utter a please or a thank you.
I mean, there's some really awful human beings who can't, but we won't go into politics.
There's also that, right? There are even more. There's grades of awfulness, right? So those people can even, but even some of the awful ones can do please or thank you. But kindness is demonstrating through your actions that you genuinely care about another human being. It's having difficult conversations, being direct, having a way to disagree without disrespect. All these things that require a civil community and world to exist requires kindness, not just simple niceness.
Yeah, I like that. And I think we're on the same page with that. I talk about, civility too, in that same thing where incivility may be unintentional, but it's about essentially showing somebody you don't value them. And it could be cutting someone off on the freeway or interrupting them in a meeting. Whereas civility, and so I joke with my company's civility partners, I'm just trying to make people normal, or the company just normal. Let's just act with some grace and kindness and civility and demonstrate to each other that we value each other. And it doesn't have to be, here's an award for saying something amazing. It's just, let's treat people like we value them. And that's not that hard if people could be self-aware around the way, the ways in which all of us have interrupted. I think I just interrupted you earlier in this show.
No, and I did too.
Sorry. So like just being aware of all the ways that we might mistreat people, even though not intentionally. It's not that everybody is a horrible person. And so, yeah.
Well, but to your point too, I mean, and I know this is Catherine's corner, so I can't. But I do want to ask you a question about this. I mean,
Sure.
I've always kind of joked around, and I'm so curious because of your extensive experience in this field. I've always joked, but it's not really a joke because it's based in some level of truth. I have never, I'm not, and I don't like to use absolutes, but I've never met a workplace bully who's ever admitted to being one.
Mm-hmm.
It's often this idea. Have you run into one?
Yeah.
Like, okay, who's actually admitted?
Well, it's the process. I coach these people who have been accused of bullying. Sometimes it's on the heels of a harassment investigation, and it's not technically a hostile work environment because that's related to discrimination over a protected characteristic. But I'm like, if they're using hostile, they feel hostile. They don't know it as a technical legal ramification. Anyway, so often, no, when I first meet them, they do not know. They have been hearing from maybe HR or the CEO that they're rough around the edges. They sometimes will say things like, I know I'm tough, but I'm just the tough manager. I'm just holding people accountable.
Yes, that's always the one.
Yeah. So my process is to interview people who work with them.
Yep,
and so it's a 360, but it's a very organic 360. And then I actually move all the interview notes into themes. And then I read that document to them. And it's often about 20 pages. And it's like first theme, people say you embarrass them in public or shame them publicly. And then I read the words. And so it's not HR saying be nicer. It's not me saying. And so that is the moment that they start to understand the impact. So I think a lot of them know they're hard to work with. They don't understand the impact that they're having. And there's a real distinction there. So when I can show them that impact, most of the time they're like, holy moly, please help me. I don't want to be seen this way. Sometimes they say, I don't care. And then I say, cool, we're not going to work together then because I can't help you. Yeah, and you're a psychopath. No, I'm just kidding. Glad I'm not your neighbor. You might murder. No, I'm just kidding. So no, it's that they don't know the impact that they're having. But I do find a lot of times they actually care very much about the organization, and they're just trying to get results. And then, of course, the organization's been rewarding them for the way they get results. They get results, and then they get promoted. And then they're like, what do you mean there's something wrong with the way I behave? So
it's horrifying. And that's why I find, when I initially ask them or have a conversation with them, very few people admit to it. But you're right. After you take the time and you do the consultative work, you almost lay a case that's objective at their feet, and they have to look at the stark, cold truth of this. And, some sociopathic folks will deny it away or just be like, hey, that's on them. I care about the organization. I'm screaming at them because I care about the patient in the bed. That's why I'm screaming at them. I was like, okay, well, again, if you really care about the patient in the bed, you probably should stop screaming at the people who care for the patients in the bed.
Right.
It's just all these things that require deeper thought around this, but it all comes back to self-awareness. I think if there's one through line, it's self-awareness, a willingness to look within and be able to do so without defensiveness and be able to do the hard work of realizing, gosh, I'm harming people. And regardless if I don't feel that if I'm coming from a place of pure intent, it's about the impact, not your intent. Right. And that's what's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say too, the organization, kind of that example of promoting people who got results without care for how they got those results. Organizations don't do very well at holding people accountable to civility, and it's like, and it's such a funny thing where, I'm speaking to an HR group at a conference or something, and somebody will always raise their hand and say, well, bullying's not unlawful. What are we supposed to do? Kind of a thing. I'm like, have you ever fired someone for being late too many times? Have you ever given someone a disciplinary action because they ticked off a client really bad? Well, none of that's unlawful either, but you figured out how to do it. And it's
exactly.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing of like, well, we can manage behaviors that like impact clients or the organization or something we can see, but because we feel like we can't quantify your bad behavior, we can't address it. It's mind-boggling.
Doesn't make any sense. And if you're really focusing on solid documentation, that's one of the things I talk about in making work is really how to navigate these challenges in a way that's practical and tactical, instead of just going in and being like, oh, my boss makes me feel sad. We're like, well, you know what? That's awful, first of all, to be clear. But if you want to get the attention of an HR representative who's heard tons of sob stories about their career, you're going to have to get really tactical and thoughtful about how you build your case. Does this run in violation of the stated mission, vision, values that your organization has, your handbook, for if you happen to have one, around how people should be acting, and get really strategic around how to do this to make it hard and create a case for how much money is being lost in turnover numbers. And if you have employee engagement numbers that you can put in so many different things, because that's what the work I did as a consultant.
You're getting all excited. You're like,
I know. I was like, oh gosh, let's go. I'm ready to flip tables up in here. There's so much, Catherine, around the work that you do and the work that I do, that there's so many people that come up to me and they're like, you know what? I'm just so grateful someone's fighting the fight, because I'm afraid to say something. I'm afraid to speak up. I'm a single mom, or I'm a single parent, and I don't have the flexibility to stand up for myself for fear that I could lose my job, or the job will remain and it'll just be unbearable, that it's going to affect my ability to parent my children. You, in what I do, helps people to realize, like, that's cool. I'll be your voice for you. I'll speak for you and bring attention to this, so we can make sure that we hopefully can eradicate this from our earth sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And I always tell HR too that, people always say, well, the number one reason people don't report is fear of retaliation. And my answer is, well, that puts it on them. Why are they afraid of retaliation in your organization? And that's an organizational culture problem.
That's correct.
Not a them problem.
That's not a them problem. And there's some HR folks, God bless them, who don't keep confidentiality, right? No. So like there's that. So that's also scary for someone. In my book, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but it's a high number of folks who do report to HR, and then they report that the situation's gotten worse after that. So there's now that fear to overcome, right? The idea of, I think this is my last shot of getting something done. And then you do this, and then, it's like, I mean, HR, no offense to HR. I love HR. I'm former HR, but we're risk managers, right? We want to make sure we mitigate the risk to the organization. And if some surgeon is bringing in millions of dollars to the organization, and a nurse is complaining about the surgeon's bedside manner, for lack of a better way of putting it, unfortunately, the surgeon's not going to get called into the principal's office, so to speak. It's going to be the person who brought up the complaint. And that's really where the problem lies.
Right. And I think therein is another part of the answer as to why we're here. I think HR's role in organizations hasn't come far enough. We've been talking about getting a seat at the table forever. And now we've got some CHROs out there in the world. So we've moved the needle on that conversation, but not enough where I think, when CEOs stop seeing HR as a cost center, somebody I have to pay to run costs like payroll and benefits, and more of a, HR and the CEOs they report to need to see HR as for the people.
Correct.
And we got a long way to go on that.
We sure do. We do.
Now, if everybody feels worse, hopefully, no, I'm just kidding.
We're gonna get there, though. And that's why I'm so hopeful about this, Catherine. I really do think there's so many smart people in the field of HR and outside of the field who realize a people-centric approach to managing these issues is important, because if you want to be competitive and bring the best people to work for you and also retain the good people that you have, bad cultures are people know word gets out pretty quick, right? So you want to create an environment where, like, oh yeah, that type of stuff doesn't happen here. We have a culture where that stuff gets squashed instantly. Who would not want to work for an organization like that? And word can get out pretty quickly, but we need a more people-centric approach to be able to address this stuff.
Yeah. I want to add something too. And Kelly says that she loves your example about single parents having that heightened worry to speak up due to the ramifications. So thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Christina, also for listening. Something that I wonder how many other people are going through this journey is, it's only been recently with more around Black Lives Matter and equality and equity and all of this, that I've actually really started to recognize how, what's the word I'm looking for? How how it's impacted me in ways that I didn't know before. So of course I have the stories of like that one time I was sexually harassed, because everybody has those stories. And the one time that this happened, that. So like these real clear moments of that. But then especially part of it too, I am a single mom, and realizing like the ways in which my networking group actually hinders my growth in that, not on purpose. But I guess what I'm saying is I've been having a lot of like, oh my God, this systemic problems that I didn't even realize were problems for me are becoming more and more clear. And I just wonder how many other people out there are going through that and still have a long way to go, as I do, of like fighting the good fight around equity.
Oh yeah.
And obviously I've been talking about bullying. I'm not an equity, dibs expert by any means, but I've been talking about being an upstander for 15 years and all this. So I guess I'm sort of shocked at how much recognition I've had lately of like, wow, that too, that also is holding me back. Oh yeah, and that over there. And then of course, recognizing for other people of color or people with disabilities. So I think there's a lot for all of us to recognize and learn about, I guess.
There is. And I think it always seems to come back to self-awareness, right? Because I mean, I had a situation at a previous job where I was promoted, and the person came up to me, a person came up to me afterward and said, because like there was a big organization-wide announcement, all that fun stuff. And then I was walking through the halls of this particular place, and someone came up to me, leader came up to me and said, "You know what, Shola? I think the reason why you got promoted is that you don't act Black." Now, right? So it's mind-blowing. And that person, honestly, I thought that they were giving me a compliment, which is ridiculous on so many different levels, right? So I'm sitting here and it's like, part of the challenge when you're dealing with these moments of blatant, just complete lack of self-awareness is that now I'm stuck in a situation where I have to go through these rapid fire questions in my head. Should I address it now? Should I say something? Should I let it go? Do I have a relationship worth maintaining with this person? Should I educate them? All these things.
Do I punch them in the face? I mean,
yeah, like all these are like seriously like choose your own adventure, like type of awfulness that you could take on any path that could ruin your career, your mental health, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I find now to help people become more self-aware, and I wrote about this in my upcoming book, but it's a pretty powerful, simple question that you can just direct at someone when they're really off the wall. And I said this to this person. It's like, "Oh, hey, Shola, you don't, the reason why you get promoted, you don't act Black." And I just simply said, "What do you mean by that?" That's it. And I just let it, did you try to give me a gift? I'm like, "Nah, fam, I don't want it. You take it. Tell me what's inside." And he was just, I didn't mean any offense. But the thing that's beautiful about that is like, incivility is something that you can do intentionally or unintentionally, but I want you to intentionally be the one who unpacks it. I want you to take a minute to think about this. Instead of me having to do the emotional labor on your benefit, I'm now leaning back and saying, "Hey, what you said isn't I don't have to address it with anger." But usually when I do that, they then have to go through it and have the self-awareness lightning bolt go through their brain that should have been there prior to them even uttering the comment in the first place. But it does allow them. And really quick, last thing on this. One of my friends, she had a situation where she went to she is in a same-sex marriage, and she went to a car dealership and was like, "Hey, my wife is going to come tomorrow to pick up the car." And the sales rep was like, "You're a lesbian, but you're so pretty." And, right? And so she used
I'll be getting my car from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. But she's like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And then eventually the same lightning bolt of self-awareness came through. So my job in a sense is to help people become more self-aware so they're not jerks and harming people.
I love that. That's a tip I often talk about too, asking the question. My fun car dealership story is shopping for cars with my now ex-husband, but like always looking at him.
Oh yeah, now I'm talking to you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he was like, "You need to talk to her. You're going to lose this sale." But I wish I would have said, "Hey," something like, "Hey, how come you're not looking at me?"
Seriously, because sometimes because they think, "Oh, the man is the man of the house here." Like, what? Yeah. This is the 1930s. What are we doing? But this is the world we live in, and it's just like, Dios mío, we have to be better, right? We have
Yeah.
to be better and have to be more aware and think about how these thoughts and actions affect others.
Yeah, I think, and Reed says, what do you mean by that is brilliant? Also gets to intent versus impact. And I'll add too, I think it probably sends a shock through their system to keep, they won't probably say that again, and
No.
hopefully won't say some other things also. You know, I think it's enough of a shock to them when you say that, because they can't often answer. And then it's like, oh, maybe
It's
I shouldn't
impossible
have
to
said that.
answer. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you want to double down on just straight up bigotry, but usually most people are kind of
Like,
like,
oh, oops.
let me see if I can dig myself out of this a little bit instead of just falling into the abyss of hate, So usually that question does wake them up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we are out of time. I really appreciated this, and we need to hang out more often,
Heck
because
yeah.
we respectfully agreed the whole time we were going to talk about if you can respectfully disagree, but maybe we'll explore that on a part 2.
Oh, that's an entirely different session that we need to go deep on as well. So happy to do this again. If anyone is interested, happy to do so.
Yeah, and please do, if you want to get a hold of Shola, you can catch him on the LinkedIn. This video will be here forever, so please share it out if you found it useful. And thank you again. And please tell everyone your website so they can get a hold of you.
Oh yeah, super easy. Just sholarichards.com. Yeah, just find
There
me.
you go.
Yeah, there it is. And find me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. That's my home. So let's just rock me there. Be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, and bye everyone. We'll see you.